I never imagined that the worst betrayal of my life would happen in broad daylight. Right in my own backyard. Not at a business meeting. Not during one of the hostile takeovers that made my name a headline. But at home, the one place I believed was safe. The one place I never expected the truth to ambush me. I had only returned to grab a set of documents I forgot for an international investor call later that evening. A small mistake. Nothing unusual. My assistant even offered to send someone from the office to retrieve it, but I told her I'd be quicker. Besides, my wife Serena wasn't expecting me back for another 3 hours. And my mother Althea, the woman whose hands shaped my entire life, was outside enjoying her afternoon tea, or so I thought. As I drove through the gates of my Atlanta estate, I remember thinking the day felt too quiet. No gardeners trimming hedges. No faint music drifting from the kitchen where Serena usually hummed while she cooked. It was silence that felt wrong. Like something inside the house had stopped breathing. I parked near the side entrance, stepped out, and was halfway across the courtyard when I heard it. A voice. Small. Shaking. My mother's voice. "No, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." I froze. My blood turned cold instantly, the kind of cold that creeps into your bones before your mind can catch up. And then came the reply. Sharp, venomous, nothing like the sweet tone Serena used whenever I was around. "Save the tears. You should have thought about that before you disrespected me." Every step I took toward the backyard felt heavier than the last. My pulse pounded so loudly I could feel it in the back of my neck. I moved slowly, quietly, the way a man does when his soul already knows something terrible is waiting on the other side. When I rounded the corner and saw the scene on my patio, I swear my world tilted. There was my 74-year-old mother sitting helplessly on the wet tiles, drenched from head to toe. Dirty brown water dripped from her gray hair, soaked into her clothes, and pooled beneath her trembling hands. And standing over her, clutching an empty bucket, breathing hard, was my wife, Serena Blake Michaels. The woman I had trusted with my empire. The woman I believed had a good heart. The woman I thought would protect my mother as fiercely as I did. In that moment, something in my chest cracked so loudly I could feel it. Before I take you deeper into what happened next, into the choices that changed everything about my marriage, my family, and my understanding of loyalty, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, if you've ever ignored your instinct because you wanted to believe the best, if this opening already hits you in your chest, subscribe to Tales by Amani. Hit that like button. And drop your country in the comments below. Because this one will change the way you see trust forever. Now let me tell you how we got here. My name is Jordan Michaels, and if you know anything about me from the papers or the interviews, you probably think I'm the man who has everything under control. Discipline. Precision. Success measured in skyscrapers and stock tickers. But that afternoon, the truth hit me with a force I still feel in the back of my chest. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how rich, no matter how disciplined, you can still be blind where it matters most. That Thursday began with meetings, those long, sharp conversations where people argue quietly about numbers they pretend not to take personally. Halfway through the third agenda point, I reached for a folder and realized something was missing. My documents. The ones containing preliminary contracts for a negotiation I couldn't afford to mishandle. I had left them at home. I almost asked my assistant to send a driver. It would have been easier. But something in me insisted it'd be quicker to go myself. So I excused myself from the meeting, told the team I'd be right back, and headed out. I didn't know I was driving toward the moment that would split my life into before and after. The gate to my estate slid open with its usual quiet authority. The driveway stretched out in front of me. Smooth, clean, lined with sculpted hedges and the kind of calm that wealth buys but cannot guarantee. I pulled in, cut the engine, and stepped out into an afternoon warm enough to soften every shadow. And then the first strange feeling hit me. The air felt wrong. Not cold. Not tense. Just wrong. The kind of wrong your body senses before your mind understands. When I entered the house, that feeling spread deeper. Silence. Not peaceful silence. Not the kind that feels earned. This one was heavy, thick, unnatural, like the house was holding its breath. Normally, I'd hear something by now. The house staff moving around. Serena on the phone. My mother, Althea, in the kitchen humming one of her old songs. She had been staying with us while recovering from surgery, and even her quiet felt warm. But this silence wasn't warm. It had edges. I stepped through the foyer slowly, listening without meaning to. Not for trouble, just for anything familiar. Footsteps. A voice. A laugh. The clink of dishes. Nothing. I took a few steps toward my office, expecting to grab the documents and leave quickly. Then I heard it. A voice. Faint. Trembling. A sound that didn't belong in a house like mine. Please. Please don't. My mother. I stopped mid-stride. A cold jolt ran down my back. There are few things in this world that can freeze a grown man in place, but hearing your mother plead is one of them. I turned toward the hallway leading to the back of the house. As I walked closer, the voice became clearer, weak, apologetic, frightened in a way I had never heard from her. My heart began to pound, not fast, but heavy, each beat like a warning. Another noise reached me, the faint slosh of water. I rounded the corner and saw something on the floor. Drops. Dark. Irregular drops. Water mixed with something brownish. Dirt. Mud. I didn't know. I only knew the trail was fresh, leading toward the patio door. Something inside me tightened. I followed the trail slowly, each step making the silence feel louder. I pushed the patio door open, expecting, hoping, for some explanation that made sense. Instead, I stepped into a nightmare. My mother, my 74-year-old mother, was sitting on the cold patio tiles, drenched from head to toe. Filthy brown water dripped from her hair, down her neck, soaking into her clothes. She was shivering, not just from the wetness but from the humiliation. Her hands were splayed on the ground, trying to push herself up, but her body trembled too much to obey her. And standing over her, my wife, Serena Blake Michaels, holding an empty white bucket in her hand. My breath left my chest. My mind couldn't process the picture. My elegant, polished wife standing above my soaked, trembling mother like a queen over a defeated servant. Serena's expression wasn't one of guilt. It was surprise. Sharp, immediate, the kind you see when someone's mask gets ripped away without warning. She hadn't expected me home. She hadn't expected to be seen. "Jordan," she started, but her voice cracked. I wasn't listening. Not to her. I walked straight to my mother and fell to my knees beside her. The cold of her wet clothing hit my skin instantly. I took off my jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, lifting her gently, trying to shield her from a world she didn't deserve to face like this. "Mom! Mama! Are you okay?" My voice felt foreign, tight, raw. She didn't look at me at first. She looked down, ashamed, like she had done something wrong. "I'm sorry, son," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just spilled something. She said I made a mess. She said I needed to learn." Her voice broke. I felt something rip open inside me. A silent tear from the place where trust lives. I lifted my head slowly and turned to face Serena. She stood frozen, still clutching the bucket, still trying to figure out what version of the story she should tell, still hoping she could twist this into something forgivable. Her mouth opened like she was about to begin one of her rehearsed explanations. "Jordan, listen." That's all she managed before I stood up fully. The world around me went distant. The sunlight, the patio furniture, the sound of water dripping from my mother's clothes. Everything blurred except the woman standing in front of me. My voice was so soft I barely heard it myself. "Serena, what did you do?" Standing there on that patio, staring at my mother shivering on the ground and my wife gripping an empty bucket, a single truth pulsed through my chest. This moment didn't start today. It began years ago, long before wealth, long before Serena, long before the polished life I now occupied. And to understand why this betrayal split me open the way it did, you have to understand the woman who raised me. Because everything I am, everything I became, traces back to her. My mother, Althea Michaels, has never been a woman the world celebrates. She never had a headline, never stepped onto a red carpet, never held a title grander than assistant or cashier. But she carried something far more valuable: strength wrapped in gentleness, sacrifice hidden behind a tired smile, love in its purest, most unpolished form. I grew up knowing struggle like a sibling. Bills that arrived faster than paychecks. Landlords who knocked harder than opportunity. Nights when the fridge was loud and empty, humming its hunger into the apartment. Times when the lights flickered because the electricity bill trembled on the edge of overdue. My mother shielded me from most of it. Or she tried to. She worked at a laundromat during the day, cleaned offices at night, and braided hair on weekends just to cover enough ground for us to breathe. I remember her hands, always tired, always cracked, always warm. She would come home smelling of detergent, dust, and the faint sweetness of the peppermint candy she kept in her pocket, so she wouldn't fall asleep on the bus. She never let me feel poor. She let me feel loved. She didn't complain. She didn't break. She whispered prayers into the fabric of our days and told me, "Jordan, you don't have to be rich to live richly. You just need heart." But life has a way of twisting a child's dreams into something sharper. As I grew older, I didn't just want to live richly. I wanted to lift her out of the life that kept trying to drown her. Every night I saw her kneeling over the kitchen sink washing her work uniform by hand because the laundromat charged extra for machines. Every morning her alarm went off at 4:30. Every evening she would fall asleep in the chair, still wearing her shoes. Those memories became fuel. I built my ambition on the bones of her sacrifices. I started in construction. Long days, longer nights, learning foundation work and project management until I could predict problems before they even happened. From there, I moved into real estate investments, then tech integrations, then acquisitions. Every success I had, every deal I closed, every million I earned, I carried my mother's tired eyes in the back of my mind, reminding me why I needed to climb higher. By 37, people called me a billionaire. I never cared about that title. The only thing that mattered was seeing my mother finally breathe without worry. And she did. I bought her a home, paid off every debt she had ever carried, made sure she never had to scrub, lift, or work again. For the first time in her life, she lived softly. And somewhere in that new chapter of comfort, I met Serena Blake. She walked into my world like a warm breeze, elegant, poised, with a kind of beauty that made people pause mid-sentence. Serena had a charm that wasn't loud. It was quiet, deliberate, the kind you notice only when you realize you've been staring longer than you should. She knew how to listen. She knew how to smile. She knew how to tilt her head at just the right angle when she asked about your dreams. I met her at a charity gala I had co-sponsored. She brushed past the crowd with confidence, like she belonged everywhere. When she introduced herself, her voice had that soft, cultured polish that money can't buy. It's inherited or learned slowly over years. What drew me wasn't her beauty, though. It was the way she looked at me like she saw the man, not the public figure. At least, that's what I believed then. When she found out about my mother, the way I spoke about her, the pride I took in how far she'd come, Serena acted impressed. She told me she admired men who valued family. She said she loved how deeply I respected the woman who raised me. She made me feel understood, accepted, safe. I didn't know it was performance. I didn't know admiration could become a weapon. I didn't know I had mistaken charm for character. The first months of our relationship felt perfect. The trips, the quiet nights, the shared dreams. Serena could slip into any environment, a boardroom, a gala, a family dinner, and shine as if she had trained her whole life for the role. So when the time came for her to meet my mother, I thought it would be a beautiful moment. My two worlds finally merging. I remember the day clearly. My mother had cooked. She wore her favorite blue blouse, the one she saved for important occasions. She even styled her gray hair into soft curls and kept touching them nervously in the mirror, as if trying to impress the woman she believed had captured my heart honestly. Serena arrived with flowers, a smile, and a charm offensive so smooth it could have been bottled and sold. But my mother saw something I didn't. Serena hugged her, complimented her home-cooked meal, admired her decor. Yet the smile she gave my mother, the one I missed because I wasn't looking close enough, was not the smile she gave me. It didn't reach her eyes. Not even a little. And now, standing in the wreckage of what happened on that patio, I finally understood why. If I'm honest with myself, the warning signs didn't start on the patio. They didn't start with a bucket or with my mother's trembling voice. They started quietly, softly, weeks earlier, like hairline cracks hidden beneath fresh paint. You don't see them at first, not because they're invisible, but because you don't expect them to exist in the home you built with your own hands. When my mother moved into the mansion after her surgery, Serena acted supportive. She insisted it was the right thing. She told me she wanted Althea close so she could heal properly. And for a moment, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. A part of me still saw Serena through the glow of new marriage. Polished, well-mannered, flawless. But even then, quietly, subtly, something in the air began to shift. The first week seemed peaceful. My mother spent most of her time resting in the guest suite with her books and herbal teas. Serena brought her meals with a smile. She asked how the pain was, how the healing was going, how the physical therapy felt. It looked caring. It sounded caring. But every now and then, I'd notice a flicker. A tightness at the corner of Serena's mouth. A flash of impatience in her eyes. A small breath she'd release when my mother turned away, like she was lowering a mask. Tiny off moments. The kind you brush aside because you don't want to rewrite the story you've already decided is true. The first humiliation came disguised as a mistake. One morning my mother called to me from her room. Her reading glasses, always kept in the same ceramic dish on her nightstand, were gone. She looked embarrassed asking about them, as if misplacing something made her a burden. I checked the room thoroughly. Nothing. Later that evening, Serena found them behind the laundry basket in the closet. "Oh, Althea," she said lightly, "you must have dropped them. You really should keep track of your things." My mother smiled politely, but I saw her cheeks flush. I didn't say anything. I should have. A few days later, her medication routine fell apart. She had everything organized, each pill sorted into a weekly dispenser my mother took pride in keeping accurate. But suddenly doses went missing. The Monday tab was empty when she swore she hadn't touched it. Tuesday's pills ended up in Sunday's compartment. She asked me if maybe she mixed them up somehow. She never forgot things like that. Before I could say anything, Serena jumped in. "It's normal. Surgery affects memory. Don't worry, Jordan. I'll keep an eye on it." My mother went silent. She only nodded, pressing her lips together. I told myself Serena meant well, but the knot in my chest tightened by one small notch. Then came the dinner party. I had invited a few business partners and their spouses for a quiet evening. A simple meal, nothing extravagant. My mother loves hosting. Even if she wasn't strong enough to help, she liked being part of the preparation, giving input on centerpieces or choosing which wine glasses should go out. During the main course, the conversation drifted to art and family tradition. My mother mentioned a painting technique she'd read about during recovery. Her voice was soft, polite, and unsure, trying to contribute without overstepping. Serena cut her off with a gentle laugh. "Oh, Althea," she said, placing a hand on my mother's arm, "that's not quite how the technique works. Let me explain it properly." The table fell quiet for half a second. Just long enough for embarrassment to sink into my mother's face. Her eyes lowered. Her shoulders tightened. I saw it, saw how that simple interruption sliced through her confidence, but I convinced myself it was nothing. Serena is probably just nervous, I thought. She doesn't mean harm. She's still adjusting to having my mom around. She's trying to help. But each justification left a sour taste in my mouth. After the guests left, my mother pulled me aside gently. "Son," she said, careful with her words, "I don't want to trouble you, but I think, maybe, Serena doesn't like me very much." I shook my head immediately. I told her not to overthink it. I told her Serena had been under stress. I told her moving into a new environment could make anyone sensitive. All the while, a small voice inside me whispered, "Listen to her." But I didn't. Because love can make a blind man confident. And confidence can make him a fool. The following week, more things kept slipping out of place. My mother's scarf, her favorite one from years back, disappeared for 2 days before turning up folded in the pantry. The TV remote kept getting misplaced, even though my mother always kept it on the armrest. Her tea kettle would be left empty, though she swore she filled it the night before. Each time, Serena had an excuse ready. A soothing tone. A gentle hand on my shoulder. She's still recovering. She's forgetful. She's probably overwhelmed. But Serena didn't say these words with concern. She said them with a smoothness that felt prepared. If I had been paying attention, I would have seen how her resentment simmered beneath the quiet veneer she wore. The way her jaw tightened whenever my mother needed help. The way her eyes narrowed when my mother laughed on the phone with one of her friends. The way her smile stretched too thin when I showed affection toward Althea. They were fleeting glances, the kind a stranger would miss, but they carried a sharpness I now regret ignoring. One night I found my mother sitting alone in the dark of the kitchen, holding a cup of tea she hadn't touched. She gave me a small smile, fragile in its effort. "I'm trying, Jordan," she whispered. "I really am." Those words settled in my chest like stones. But I still didn't let myself see the truth. I kissed her forehead and told her everything was fine. That she was imagining tension that wasn't there. That Serena cared for her. That the house was adjusting. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't comforting her. I was comforting myself. But the moment I should have taken seriously, the one that still echoes in my thoughts, came days later. I was walking past the hallway near the guest room when I heard Serena's voice, low and sharp, slicing through the quiet. "For once in your life, stop acting helpless." My footsteps froze. Silence followed. Not peaceful. Not innocent. The kind of silence that hides behind closed doors. I stepped back, pretending I hadn't heard. Pretending it wasn't meant for my mother. Pretending that the coldness in her tone could be explained. But deep down, something inside me shifted. A realization too heavy to lift. Serena didn't know I was in the hallway. She didn't know her mask had slipped. She didn't know I heard the truth beneath her breath. A truth that whispered like a warning. The woman I married was not the woman I thought she was. And that whisper became the beginning of the end. That whisper, "The woman I married was not the woman I thought she was," stayed in the back of my mind like a faint bruise. I didn't fully accept it, not then, not when the truth was still soft enough to bend. But it lingered. And over the next few weeks, that lingering grew teeth. Everything changed slowly at first. Small adjustments. Little shifts. Moments so minor they could be dismissed if you wanted to dismiss them, and I did. Serena started becoming territorial. Not in loud, dramatic ways. Nothing obvious. It was quieter, more controlled, the kind of territorial that hides behind courtesy. The house had always felt open. My mother could walk into the kitchen and help herself to tea. She could sit anywhere, touch anything, ask anything. After all, it was her home as much as mine. But Serena began drawing invisible lines. I first noticed it when my mother walked into the living room while Serena was arranging throw pillows for guests who were expected later that evening. My mother offered to help. Serena didn't raise her voice. She didn't frown. She simply answered with a tone that sounded soft but felt sharp. "It's okay, Althea. I've already done the important parts." My mother stepped back as if scolded like a child. Another time, my mother reached for a pot in the kitchen, her favorite one for making ginger tea. Serena, who rarely cooked, was standing nearby and gently placed her hand over the pot first. "Oh, that one is for special meals. I'd rather you use the smaller one." Just like that, the kitchen didn't feel like my mother's space anymore. Little by little, Serena inserted herself into every decision. The menu, the seating, the decor, the schedule, and always with a smile that looked innocent enough to fool anyone who didn't know her tone. The only thing she didn't touch was my office. Every other room seemed to fall under her control. And with each shift, my mother grew quieter. The embarrassing moment that should have woken me up happened during a social gathering with a few business partners and their wives. It was meant to be a relaxed Sunday afternoon. Light drinks, catered food, casual conversations. My mother loved these events. She enjoyed being around people and took pride in looking her best. Before the guests arrived, she asked Serena what she could do to help. Serena gave her a soft, sweet smile, the one she used when she wanted to appear gracious. "Could you handle the salad bowls, Althea? Just set them out on the table evenly." Simple enough. My mother nodded, happy for a task. She arranged the bowls neatly, carefully, the way she always did. But what neither of us knew was that Serena had changed the table layout that morning. She had switched the bowls, added new ones, and moved the serving pieces, without telling my mother. Once the guests arrived, Serena walked straight over to the table with a loud, performative gasp. "Oh no! Althea, this isn't how the table is supposed to look," she said, her voice dripping with gentle disappointment. "Didn't I explain it clearly?" The room fell quiet. My mother froze, humiliated. Her hands hovered over the bowls like she no longer trusted herself to touch anything. The guests exchanged awkward glances. I felt heat rush into my face. Serena laughed lightly, as if she were trying to soften the blow. "Don't worry, it's fine. I'll fix it." But the damage was done. My mother shrank into herself for the rest of the evening, shoulders tucked, eyes lowered, voice small. Still, she carried herself with grace, complimenting guests, helping where she could, hiding the embarrassment deep enough that only a son would see it. Later that night, after the guests left, Serena came to me with a mixture of concern and weary sympathy. "Jordan, I don't know how to say this without sounding harsh, but your mother seems overwhelmed. Maybe hosting is too much for her. She looked confused today. Maybe the surgery recovery is affecting her more than you realize." Her words slid into me like hooks. I knew my mother wasn't confused. I knew she wasn't weak. But Serena had wrapped her statement in such a gentle tone that I found myself questioning what I had seen. Doubting my own instincts. Feeling guilty for assuming Serena had been too harsh. Maybe she didn't mean to embarrass her. Maybe she really thought my mother needed guidance. Maybe I was reacting too emotionally. Serena rested her hand on my arm. "I love her, Jordan. I'm just trying to help." She looked sincere. She sounded sincere. And sincerity can be a powerful mask. My guilt began to grow, not for failing my mother, but for doubting the woman I married. But late that night, after the house had gone still, I found my mother sitting alone on the patio, staring out into the dark. She didn't say anything at first. She didn't have to. I sat beside her and waited. Finally, she exhaled softly. "Son, I know you love your wife. I see that. And I don't want to come between that." She paused, choosing her words carefully, the way she always did when something pained her. "But I think she doesn't want me here." I shook my head instantly. "Mom," she stressed. "The hosting today was." She held up her hand, stopping me gently. "Jordan, I may be old, but I'm not blind." Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't accusing. It was resigned, heavy, tired. I tried to reassure her, told her she was imagining things, told her Serena meant well, told her recovery was making her sensitive. But every word felt like a lie I wrapped in a ribbon and handed to myself so I wouldn't have to face what was right in front of me. My mother studied my face for a long moment, the way she used to when I was a child telling half-truths to avoid trouble. Then she laid her hand over mine. "Son," she whispered, her voice soft but steady, "one day, you will see what I see." She didn't say it with bitterness. She said it with certainty. A quiet certainty that made something deep inside me tremble. I didn't realize it then, but that was the moment the foundation shifted beneath my feet. Not with a crash, not with a scream, but with a whisper strong enough to haunt me long after the night ended. My mother's words, "One day, you will see what I see," echoed in my head for days. I tried brushing them off, telling myself she was tired, still recovering, too sensitive, too aware. But no matter how many excuses I whispered into my own mind, the house felt wrong. Not loud wrong. Not chaotic wrong. Just a different kind of silence. The kind that feels staged, rehearsed, controlled. Serena floated through the rooms with an ease that made me uncomfortable, as if she could finally breathe now that my mother had started keeping to herself more. She hummed while fixing her hair, moved with bright confidence during breakfast, and greeted me with kisses that felt extra warm, extra sweet, the way people act when they're hiding the aftertaste of something bitter. My mother, meanwhile, seemed smaller, quieter, like she was folding herself into corners of the mansion, hoping not to be noticed. The tension wasn't visible, but it lived in the air like humidity, heavy enough to cling, light enough to ignore. And then everything split open. It was early afternoon. I had come home between meetings because I forgot a contract in my office. Another rushed moment that would bring me closer to the truth without fully revealing it. As I entered the hallway leading to the guest room, I heard voices. Not loud. Not yelling. Just sharp, controlled. Serena's voice was the first I recognized. I'm tired of repeating myself. You're not helping. Honestly, you slow everyone down. My body went still. Then my mother's voice, soft, trembling, trying desperately not to break. Serena, please. I'm doing my best. Your best. Serena scoffed. Your best is dropping things, forgetting things, wandering into rooms you shouldn't be in. You're 74, not 17. Stop acting helpless. My heart hammered in my chest. I moved closer, careful not to make noise. The door was cracked open just enough. I saw my mother standing near the dresser, hands folded in front of her, eyes lowered in shame. Serena stood inches from her, arms crossed, chin tilted with cold superiority, the softness she used around me nowhere in sight. I told you to stay out of the kitchen unless I ask, Serena continued. It's my home, and Jordan needs a calm environment. Not whatever this is. My mother whispered something I couldn't hear, but Serena's reply cut like glass. You've lived your life, Althea. Let me live mine. Stop clinging to him like he's still a little boy. That was it. I pushed the door fully open. Serena. Enough. They both turned. My mother's face drained of color. Serena, however, shifted instantly, her expression melting from condescension to wounded innocence so fast it made my stomach twist. Oh my God, Jordan, she gasped. This isn't what it looks like. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but Serena rushed to me first, grabbing my arm gently. She's been confused again, she whispered. She went through my things, and I was only asking her to be careful. She's still healing. She gets overwhelmed. My mother's eyes filled with hurt. I didn't go through anything, she said softly. Mom, wait, I murmured, trying to piece the scene together. Serena stepped in front of her, subtly, but deliberately. This is why I didn't want to say anything, Serena said, her voice shaking convincingly. I knew you would take her side. I'm just trying to keep the peace, Jordan. I've been doing everything. The house, the guests, her recovery. And she's been so defensive lately. I think the stress is getting to her. I looked between them. One woman trembling. One woman performing. And yet, Serena's words wrapped around me like fog. Warm. Comforting. Familiar. I wanted to believe her. I didn't want to believe what I had heard. She pressed her forehead against my chest. I love your mother, she whispered. You know I do. I would never hurt her. My mother flinched. My instinct was to go to her. But Serena's grip tightened, gentle enough to look affectionate, firm enough to hold me in place. And once again, I doubted myself. Doubted what I heard. Doubted the woman who raised me because I didn't want the woman I married to be a villain. The argument dissolved in a cold, suffocating silence. My mother withdrew into her room. Serena wiped non-existent tears and told me she needed a moment alone. And I, cowardly lost, pretending not to feel the truth press against my ribs, went back to my office with the contract I had come home for. That night, after hours of quiet tension, my mother came into my office wearing her favorite shawl, folded neatly around her shoulders. She smiled, not happily, but gently, like someone making peace with a painful decision. "Jordan," she said, "I think it's time I go home." The words punched the air out of my chest. "Mom, no. This is your home." She shook her head softly. "No, baby. This is your home. And I don't want to cause trouble between you and your wife." "You're not causing anything," I insisted. She touched my cheek the way she used to when I was a child. "Son, sometimes love makes people blind. And I don't want to stand in your marriage like a shadow." My throat tightened. She continued, her voice steady despite the hurt behind it. "I'll never come between your happiness. If me being here brings tension, I would rather leave. For your peace of mind." It shattered me. I could see she wasn't leaving because she wanted space. She was leaving because she felt unwanted. Because she was tired of shrinking herself. Because she knew I was too tangled in Serena's manipulation to protect her properly. The next morning, I drove her to a small apartment I owned downtown, a place meant for guests or temporary stays. She carried only 2 bags. She refused to let me hire a nurse. She insisted she was fine. As I helped her place her things inside the apartment, she smiled at me again, the same gentle, forgiving smile she always gave whenever life mistreated her. "I'll be okay, Jordan. Don't worry about me." But I worried. I worried the entire drive home. I worried even as I walked back into the mansion. And waiting for me there, right inside the doorway, was Serena, glowing with warmth, arms open, sweetness dripping from her tone like honey. "Oh baby, I missed you," she murmured, pressing herself into me. She kissed me, held me, fussed over me, made me tea, rubbed my shoulders, acting lighter, happier, almost relieved. And that's when it hit me. My mother had been right. Something was different. Something was wrong. Something I had ignored for far too long. As Serena hummed softly in the kitchen, moving with an ease she hadn't shown in weeks, I felt it, a quiet, gnawing grief settling deep in my chest. I had let my mother walk out of her home feeling unwanted. And I had ignored something. Something I should never have ignored. After my mother left the mansion and Serena's smile brightened as if the windows had finally been cleaned, the house arranged itself into a version of peace I didn't trust. It wasn't rest. It was choreography. Pillows sat at perfect angles. Music drifted at a curated volume. The staff walked softer, like someone had posted a sign that said, "Do not disturb the image." Serena flourished in it. She woke early to set flowers in thin vases, sent me midday photos of sunlight on the marble, and kissed me at the door with a practiced warmth that felt like hospitality more than love. When guests came, she shone. After they left, the glow hung on her face longer than it stayed in the rooms. If I had wanted simple comfort, I might have believed things were better. But the quiet felt staged, like a smile held a second too long for a camera. The absence of my mother wasn't relief. It was a subtraction that made the math look tidy while the numbers underneath still trembled. That's when the small contradictions began tapping, polite at first, then insistent. Serena once told me she grew up in a quiet North Carolina town, church every Sunday, public school, nothing fancy. At dinner weeks later she described summers in Birmingham and a private academy she hated for the uniforms. She had sworn she interned at a New York gallery for 2 years. Later it became 3 in Miami. Not crimes. Just mismatched edges no one notices until they can't stop noticing. One evening I came home early and heard her in the library, voice low, sentences trimmed. "He'll agree if it's framed as planning," she said, then paused, listening. "No, don't text. Call." The tone wasn't intimate. It was strategic. The call ended quickly. She turned with a soft "oh" and slid into the kind of embrace that erases questions. I asked who it was. "My cousin," she said, eyes bright, body loose with ease that looked arranged. The next day, a folder with my name on the tab lay on the console. Inside was a single blank sheet. Hours later the folder had vanished. That night I checked my office. In the bottom drawer of the credenza, beneath brand brochures and stale peppermints, I found fresh printouts of my estate summary. 2 pages wore sticky notes in neat, feminine handwriting. Update beneficiaries? Consolidate accounts before Q4? The drawer smelled faintly like Serena's perfume, a soft citrus that didn't belong to paper. In the morning, she touched my sleeve and went straight to the headline. "We should simplify the will," she said gently. "Not because anything is wrong, because clarity is love. If there's ever an emergency, I need authority to act quickly for both of us." She waited, then added a sugar-edged phrase, "Healthy boundaries with extended family help marriages last." She meant my mother without saying her name. Later that week, the suggestion sharpened. "Over halibut and white wine," Serena said. "Your mother has found her rhythm in her own place. We should formalize that. For everyone's peace." She smiled like she was offering mercy. I didn't answer. Something in me had stopped taking dictation. At the apartment downtown, my mother poured ginger tea and asked about my day the way she always had, pulling attention away from herself as naturally as breathing. We talked about small things, the weather, a neighbor's noisy parrot, a church friend who mailed her a crossword book. Then she took my hand. "Jordan," she said softly, "there's a pressure on my chest that won't move. I keep praying it off. It keeps sitting back down." She didn't dramatize it. She didn't accuse. Something in that house has turned unkind. I wanted to argue for Serena. The words wouldn't come. My mother studied my silence and nodded, as if she had heard the part one could not say. When she hugged me at the door, she whispered, "Listen to the quiet inside you before it starts shouting." That night, Serena curled against me on the couch. She laughed at a show we weren't watching and stroked the tension from my shoulder with the easy competence of someone who knows where knots live. Her phone, face down, buzzed. She didn't look. I didn't reach. Restraint can be its own kind of confession. Over the next days, the pattern became a drum. Serena asked for precise departure times and return windows. She wanted password managers, shared access, simplified accounts. "For convenience," she said, smiling. Twice I stepped into rooms where she closed a laptop with a calm, unhurried click. Once, descending the back stairs, I heard, "No, call me when he's at the office," followed by a brief silence that sounded like calculation. Even the staff absorbed the choreography. The housekeeper's eyes dipped when I greeted her. The driver answered in short, neutral phrases. The groundsman's easy laugh disappeared. When I asked if everything was fine, each of them nodded with thanks, too much smiles people use when truth would cost them work. I don't frighten easily. I do respect patterns. And every pattern pointed to the same unkind conclusion. Serena wanted territory, uninterrupted access, and a future in which my mother's presence was a story we told about the past. The morning the storm finally moved from horizon to doorstep, my phone rang at 6:11. My mother. "I'm all right," she said before I could ask. But I had a dream that wouldn't let me go back to sleep. It felt like standing on a porch smelling rain you can't see yet. She exhaled, steadying herself. "Baby, I don't want to put fear on you. I just want to put truth near you. Be careful." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the room the way you watch a stage after the actors have slipped behind the curtain. Serena lay turned away, hair fanned on the pillow, sleep perfect. The house made its early noises, the slow breath of vents, a distant thump from the ice maker, the timed lights brightening the hallway by a single polite degree. I showered, dressed, and drove to the office on autopilot. I spoke at a morning check-in and heard my voice from a distance, as if it had been lent to me. My team presented a market snapshot. Numbers moved across a screen. I nodded at the right times and offered the right phrases. Still, the quiet inside me kept gathering itself, preparing to speak. A little after noon, I stood at the windows and watched traffic braid and unbraid along the boulevard. My assistant asked whether I wanted lunch brought in. I shook my head. She lingered, studying my face like people do when they don't know what to ask. "Board deck at 3, she reminded. I said, "We'll keep it," and surprised myself by adding, "I'm stepping out for an hour." I picked up my keys. I picked up nothing else. And for reasons I would only learn standing on the other side of a glass door, I left the office early. I left the office early without announcing it to anyone, drove home on muscle memory, and watched the city pass in a blur that made no promises. The wheel felt slick under my hands. The air in the car felt too thin. A man can tell himself 1,000 small lies to preserve the life he wants, and still, there comes a quiet hour when his body refuses to cooperate with the performance. Mine had reached its hour. The gate recognized the car and opened with its usual obedience. The driveway lay ahead like a runway to a different life. From the outside, the house looked serene, glass catching sunlight, bougainvillea lifting in the breeze, a blue sheet of water in the pool unbroken and calm. I killed the engine. The silence that followed was not relief. It was a held breath. I stepped into the foyer and the air met me with that now familiar staged stillness. Music absent, footsteps withheld, every surface waiting to be seen. My shoes made a soft sound on the polished floor. A faint smell of bleach floated from the utility hall. And then, thread thin, almost imaginary, my mother's voice. Please. I'm sorry. Please don't. The words scuffed across the floor and climbed my spine. I moved before deciding to move, drawn toward the back of the house where light pressed against the glass doors. On the stone, a scattered constellation of wet marks appeared. Small brownish drops at first, then the lazy drag of a footprint, then the shimmering trail of a spill that had not yet dried. The quiet inside me stopped being quiet. It stood up. I opened the patio door. The world snapped into impossible clarity. My mother sat hunched on the tiles, soaked through, filthy water running from her hairline to her jaw, beating at her collarbone, gathering in the folds of her cardigan. Her hands braced against the stone as if the ground itself might tilt. She was shivering, not just from temperature, but from humiliation, the kind of shaking a person tries to hide so they won't frighten the one they love. Beside her stood Serena, breathing fast, an empty white bucket hanging from her hand, a thin ribbon of dirty water slipping from its lip and pattering into a broken circle on the stone. For half a heartbeat, her face was unmasked, sharp, satisfied, almost light. Then she saw me. Shock flared. Then calculation. Then the sickening soft smile that had fooled me for months. "Oh, baby," she said quickly, voice pitching upward, eyes glossing as if tears had been waiting just beyond the lids. "You scared me. I didn't hear you come in. This is not." Whatever it was, it stopped existing as a narrative option the moment my mother lifted her eyes to mine. Jordan. Barely sound. Barely breath. I crossed the patio and dropped to my knees. My jacket came off. It was around her shoulders before the part of me that loves neatness could protest the mess. The cold from her clothes bit into my wrists. Dirt flecked her palms. Strands of gray hair clung to her cheek. I felt a heat rise in my face so fast it made my eyes sting. What happened? The question left me even though I already knew the answer. "I spilled," she whispered, guilt tripping over itself to protect me from the truth. "I made a mess." Behind me, Serena's performance quickened. "She did," she said gently. "And she panicked." I was trying to help, but she got confused, and the bucket. Look, there was mud on the patio from the gardener, and she slipped. I stood. Slowly. The world narrowed to a tunnel with my wife at the end of it. "Confused," I repeated. "Yes," Serena said, relief flooding her voice as if we had found a mutually agreeable script. She stepped toward me, eyes shining, hands open. "I would never hurt her. You know that. I love your mother." I was cleaning, and she got flustered, and the water. The angle of the afternoon changed. Shadows shifted. A single leaf skated across the pool and spun in place. I looked at the bucket, at the thin lane of muddy footprints between the utility sink and this exact spot, at the soaked cardigan, at my mother's small protective hunch. There are moments when the mind can no longer be bribed. Mine refused the currency. "Stop," I said. The word wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It settled on the stone with a finality that made Serena's mouth close around the next prepared line. For the first time since I met her, she looked truly uncertain, not because she had done something wrong, but because her control had met a wall she did not build. I turned back to my mother. "We're going inside," I said quietly. She nodded, eyes wet with the effort of composure. I slid an arm under hers and helped her up. Every movement felt like lifting a history I should have protected better. Serena stepped into our path, soft hands raised as if guiding doves. "Wait, baby, please, let me explain." She started it. She threw the rag at me and said. My mother flinched, not at the lie, but at the ease of it. I looked at Serena and saw her for the first time in full daylight. Not the charm. Not the curation. Not the practiced empathy. I saw the engine behind all of it, entitlement polished into elegance, control braided into kindness, resentment wearing perfume. Beauty had been the wrapping paper. This was the gift. "Move," I said. She blinked, tears gathering exactly where a camera would want them. "Jordan, please. You're angry, and that's fair. But you're not seeing the whole." "I am," I said, and it surprised me how steady my voice felt. "I am seeing the whole thing." Her face flickered. The gloss in her eyes brightened, then fell away when it failed to open the usual door. Something colder moved in behind it. "Fine," she said softly, with a smile that did not reach any human place. "Take her inside. I'll make tea." I guided my mother through the door and onto the kitchen bench. The house swallowed us with conditioned air. I grabbed towels, wrapped them around her shoulders, tucked one over her lap. The practical movement steadied me. I turned on the kettle because that is what people do when the world tilts. They boil water and try to name it comfort. "Are you hurt?" I asked. She shook her head once. The tiny motion carried a lifetime. "I'm okay," she said. The words trembled. "I'm okay now that you're here." Serena appeared in the doorway, head tilted, voice sweet with apology. "Jordan, can we talk in the other room? Please. This has all been a misunderstanding. Emotions are high. I love you. Let me fix this." I heard the structure of her approach. Isolate, soothe, reframe, reset. The old choreography. The one I had danced to without knowing the steps were designed to move me away from my mother. "Whatever you need to say," I said, "say it here." A brief silence. Her eyes measured the room, the towels, the kettle heating, my hand on my mother's shoulder. Then anger flashed, bare and fast. "She disrespected me," Serena said, the softness dropping from her tone. "She treats me like staff. She goes through my things. She doesn't belong in this house." The kettle clicked. My mother closed her eyes, as if that sound were the only sane note available. "She belongs wherever I am," I said. Serena laughed once, a small, disbelieving sound, then leaned forward like a prosecutor closing. "You've been manipulated by guilt your entire life, Jordan. By her stories. By her poverty. I married you to build a future, and I will not have it derailed by—" "Enough," I said, and the word came from a deeper place than anger. It came from a line being drawn with the whole weight of a life behind it. I stood. The towels rustled. The kettle breathed steam. "Go upstairs," I said. "Pack a bag." Her mouth opened, shock, then indignation, then the quick assembly of strategy. "You're overreacting. You will regret this. This is exactly what she wants." "Pack a bag," I repeated, each syllable an anchor. "You're leaving this house. Today." The room went very quiet. Serena's face moved through expressions like masks at a market. Fear, pleading, fury, charm, each one lifted and discarded when it found no purchase. She took a small step toward me, palm open, voice low, intimate, the "remember who we are" tone that had rewritten so many arguments in our short marriage. "Jordan, look at me," she whispered. "I'm your wife." I did look, and that was the end of it. "You are leaving," I said. Something in her eyes hardened into a thin, dangerous calm, an acceptance that sounded like metal being set down. She turned without another word. I made tea for my mother with hands that finally stopped shaking. We sat in the gentle hiss of the kettle and the ticking silence of a house reconsidering its loyalties. When Serena came back through the kitchen with a small suitcase and sunglasses on her head like a crown, she didn't look at us. She reached for the door. "Security will escort you to your car," I said, not raising my voice, not lowering it. "The driver will take you to the hotel. My attorney will contact you tomorrow." Her hand paused on the handle. For the first time since I had met her, She didn't have a line ready. She glanced back, and I watched the precise instant understanding dawned. Not of guilt, not of harm done, but of something far more terrifying to her than truth. Control was no longer hers. When the door closed behind Serena and the house exhaled for the first time in months, I understood a simple thing. Pain can be postponed, but truth won't wait. I made my mother another cup of tea, helped her change into dry clothes, and called the doctor to check her vitals. I called security to review doorbell footage and interior cameras. I called my assistant to hold all meetings under family emergency, and to alert legal that I needed them on standby. Then I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad in front of me and wrote a single sentence at the top. Find the facts. Grief makes a man dramatic. Love makes him defensive. But facts are unbothered. They just stand there until you're ready to look. I began with what I controlled. Access. Within the hour, accounts were frozen pending review. Corporate cards connected to Serena's user profile were paused. Household purchasing permissions were revoked. Passwords were rotated. The family office flagged unusual transfers from the last 6 months and generated a report. It printed to my secure line like a quiet confession. Then I called the head of security. We sat in the operations room while the screens fast-forwarded through time. The utility sink. The bucket. The path. The moment before I walked in. No ambiguity. No mercy. The scene told itself without adjectives, and that, more than anything Serena could say, clarified who I had married. Facts make other facts easier to face. I asked my assistant to contact a discreet firm I'd used once during a hostile bid. Clean, accurate, silent. I didn't want gossip. I wanted a timeline. Where she'd worked, what she'd claimed, who had vouched for her. In parallel, my counsel began the paper trail. Protective orders for my mother, immediate separation filings, emergency injunctions against asset tampering, notice to the household staff that all requests must come from me or the estate attorney, nothing else. By nightfall, the firm returned its first pass. Thin employment history padded with title inflation. A gallery that had never heard of her. A foundation that existed mostly as a website. 2 references whose numbers rang to the same prepaid line. An apartment she somehow afforded years ago on part-time wages because the real rent had been paid by someone else. Credit reports that looked clean, too clean, because the debt lived elsewhere, under a shell entity that paid her cards and then invoiced a consulting company that did not appear to consult. There is a difference between chaos and choreography. What I saw was choreography. By morning, the second pass arrived. Loans in a cousin's name. The cousin, it turned out, was no cousin at all, just a woman who signed what she was paid to sign. A boutique planner who seeded introductions, warming rooms so Serena could glide into them. A pattern of dating older, wealthier men, each ending with a relocation, each relocation followed by a subtle upgrade in wardrobe, car, neighborhood. No charges. No scandals. Just a collection of ties cut before anyone bothered to knot them tightly. And then, the thread that pulled the whole thing open, a familiar surname hidden inside a vendor ledger. Small monthly payments from our household account to a shell company whose registered agent shared a last name with a rival I'd outbid 2 years earlier on a waterfront parcel. I stared at it a long time. I didn't know if the rival was involved or if the name was camouflage. I didn't need a conspiracy to proceed. I only needed what I already had. Intention. Isolation. Access. The firm's last delivery was a short dossier of messages recovered from cloud backups she thought she had deleted. The tone was unmistakable. Not love. Not even affection. Strategy. She had misjudged my bond with my mother. She referred to it as the lever that won't move. She predicted I would fold under gentle framing. She mapped milestones. Will revisions, account consolidations, trusted staff removal, PR alignment. There were notes about how sentiment management would make the final transfer look like planning, not power. You can sit in a room with a person and think you know them. Then you read the sentences they wrote when they thought no one was watching, and the air changes temperature. My lawyer arrived with the separation packet. He had the face good lawyers wear when clients move from shock to decision. We reviewed, line by line, emergency protections for my mother and me. Temporary support terms that prevented any rush on assets. A clear path to divorce on grounds of cruelty and calculated manipulation. He asked me whether I wanted publicity. I told him no. Not yet. I wanted order first. Publicity, if it came, would be a byproduct of clarity, not a weapon. Then I called Serena. I didn't ask where she was. I knew. The hotel we used for visiting executives had already confirmed her check-in. I didn't ask how she felt. That had guided too much of my life. I told her, in a measured voice that sounded like it belonged to someone I would hire, that the marriage was over. I told her security would escort her from the hotel to a service department while legal concluded the initial phase. I told her her cards were suspended, her access revoked, and any attempt to alter accounts would be considered a felony. I told her an officer would accompany her to collect personal items from the house at a scheduled time. I told her I had video. I told her I had records. I told her to instruct counsel to contact mine. She cried first, then begged, then shifted into the flattery that had charmed me once. Then, when none of that found purchase, she hardened. She said I was overreacting. She said my mother had poisoned me against her. She said I'd regret making a scene. Facts don't argue. They repeat themselves until you accept them. I ended the call and forwarded everything to my counsel. The recordings, the ledgers, the messages, the notes. He filed the actions before noon. By evening, my head of security texted a simple confirmation. Escort complete. No incident. The driver, neutral, unfailingly polite, returned the keys Serena had used for months and placed them on my office desk like a closing ceremony. But I wasn't finished. For years, my reputation had been a tool as much as a reflection. I had used it to steady markets, to reassure boards, to calm investors who liked predictability even when the world refused to provide it. Now I used it to tell the truth without spectacle. A concise statement went to the company's leadership and to the household staff. Effective immediately, Mrs. Blake Michaels held no authority over corporate or personal affairs. All directives flowed through me or through counsel. Any requests from outside parties, including advisors connected to Mrs. Blake Michaels, were to be refused and reported. No gossip. No narrative. Just policy. I also called the rival whose surname had appeared where it didn't belong. He denied involvement with a smoothness that told me either he was innocent or very practiced. It didn't matter. The shell was being unwound. If his fingerprints showed later, the law would meet them. What shocked everyone wasn't volume. It was speed. Decisions that take most households months took mine 48 hours. Separation. Asset freezes. Revoked access. Counsel retained. Protective orders in place. Security protocols updated. Staff briefed and protected. A private investigator's report logged with an affidavit. You learn who you are by how quickly you choose to stand in a room without blinking. The last meeting of that stretch was the hardest. I sat with my mother at her small kitchen table, the one she had already made home by placing a bowl of lemons at the center, and told her simply that she had been right. She didn't smile. She didn't say I told you so. She took my hands and said a prayer so soft it felt like a blanket. When she finished, she looked at me the way she used to when I was a boy after a scraped knee. Not with pity, but with pride that I had finally looked where it hurt. When Serena arrived with her attorney 2 days later to collect her belongings under supervision, she avoided my eyes. Her movements were economical, her face composed, her perfume faint and expensive. In the foyer, her attorney asked for one last conversation. My lawyer declined. The list was checked. The signatures were exchanged. The door was opened. On the threshold, Serena glanced back at the house as if it were a stage she had played well and longer than most. I saw the moment it landed. The lights were off, the seats empty, the set being struck. No final line. No dramatic turn. Just the soft sound of a suitcase rolling across stone and a driver clearing his throat before asking, "Ready?" And then she was gone. Officially. Completely. Not a pause. A period. When the door closed behind Serena for the last time, the house fell into a silence that wasn't staged or curated or tense. It was the kind of silence a home makes when danger has finally stepped off the porch. For the first time in months, I didn't feel watched inside my own walls. The air felt real again. Honest. Heavy, yes, but honest. I didn't stay in the mansion long that night. I grabbed my keys, left the lights on, and drove to the apartment downtown where my mother had been living since she chose to leave for my peace of mind. Even remembering those words made something inside my chest pinch. When I reached her door, I didn't knock. I couldn't. My hand just hovered there, shaking like I was the one recovering from surgery. She opened the door before I touched it. Maybe she heard the elevator, maybe a son's footsteps carry a sound only a mother recognizes. She looked up at me, her eyes soft, worn, but clearer than mine had been in months. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need details or explanations or proof. She simply said, "Baby, come inside." And I broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet, shattering way a grown man breaks when he realizes how close he came to losing the only person who ever loved him without condition. I sat at her table while she made tea, ginger, the way she likes, the way she taught me to make it when I was 12. She placed a cup in front of me, sat across from me, and waited. Not to judge, not to gloat, just to listen. "I'm sorry," I finally said, the words spilling out like they had been waiting behind my ribs for months. "Mama, I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. I should have believed you. I should have protected you." Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry, not in the way I expected. She reached out and placed her hand over mine, her skin warm from the tea mug. "Jordan," she whispered, "love can make the smartest man blind. And blind men don't need shame, they need grace." But I shook my head. "You were hurting, and I let it happen." "No," she said firmly. "You let yourself hope, and hope is not a weakness." I lowered my eyes. "I almost lost you." That made her smile, small but real. "You didn't lose me, son. I just stepped back until you could see clearly again. That's what mothers do." We talked for hours. She told me how she tried not to worry me, how she convinced herself she could endure the humiliation for the sake of my marriage, how she prayed every night that God would open my eyes before it was too late. And when she said that last part, before it was too late, my chest tightened. Because it almost was. I looked around the apartment. It was tidy, warm, filled with small touches she used to make anywhere feel like home. But it wasn't her home. It wasn't where she belonged. And I realized she had been waiting, not for me to invite her back, but for me to heal enough to understand why she left in the first place. "Mama, come home," I said quietly. "Please." She inhaled deeply. For a moment she looked uncertain, like she didn't want to intrude on the new order of my life. But then something in her eyes shifted. Something hopeful, something relieved, something that had been bruised but not broken. "When you're ready," she said gently, "I'll come." "I'm ready now." We returned to the mansion together that evening. The staff saw her first. Shoulders dropped. Faces softened. A few even whispered small greetings under their breath, the way people greet light after too much darkness. My mother walked through the foyer slowly, touching the backs of chairs, smoothing a picture frame, reacquainting herself with the home she had been pushed out of. I followed her, carrying her bags, feeling the weight of a year settle across my shoulders. In her room, the room Serena once claimed was too close to ours, my mother stood for a long while, just breathing it in. She sat on the bed, running her hand over the blanket, and whispered, "I never stopped praying for this." I sat beside her. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." She smiled sadly. "Forgiveness isn't something you earn, Jordan. It's something you ask for, and something I choose to give." We spent hours talking that night. She told me stories I had forgotten, about how stubborn I was as a boy, how fiercely I used to defend her when kids made fun of our clothes, how she always knew my heart was wired to protect. She told me she never blamed me for anything that happened. Not once. The longer she spoke, the more unbearable it became to imagine how close I came to losing the most loyal woman in my life. Not because she left, but because I nearly let someone else teach me to doubt her worth. That realization cut deeper than anything Serena had done. In the weeks that followed, the house returned to life. Not curated life, Real life. My mother planted herbs in the kitchen garden again. She sat by the patio in the evenings, reading her devotionals. She helped reorganize the pantry because, as she put it, chaos should never live where food lives. And slowly, gently, we rebuilt what Serena had tried to erode. Trust. Respect. Presence. I grew quieter inside, not numb, but clean. My days felt grounded again. My nights didn't buzz with suspicion or noise. I learned how to listen better, how to slow down, how to check not just the facts, but the quiet place inside me where truth always speaks first. One afternoon, as we cooked together, her stirring the pot, me chopping vegetables, I looked at her and felt a simple truth bloom in my chest. She deserved better. She always had. And I would spend the rest of my life making sure she never doubted that again. As the sun dipped behind the pool and warm gold filled the kitchen, my mother touched my arm with that familiar gentleness and said, "I'm proud of you, baby." I nodded, swallowing emotion I didn't bother hiding. "I'm proud of you too, Mama." And I meant it. Because she survived what many wouldn't. Because she kept faith when I lost clarity. Because she held on to love even when mine wandered. As the final reflections of that chapter of my life settled into place, I understood something I should have known from the start. Every betrayal leaves a scar, but every truth sets you free. And if you're lucky, it leads you back to the people who loved you long before the world knew your name. Thank you for hearing my story. Thank you for walking with me through every moment. From the day my world cracked open in my own backyard, to the day I finally brought my mother home where she belonged. From confusion to clarity. From manipulation to truth. From almost losing the woman who raised me, to learning how to love her better. And if there's anything I learned from this entire journey, it's this. When someone shows you who they truly are, don't wait for them to explain it. Don't wait for the apology, the tears, the excuses, or the performance. Believe them the first time. A woman who can pour filthy water on a 74-year-old mother, that's not a lapse in judgment. That's a window into her soul. Choose your people wisely. Honor the ones who stood in your corner long before you had money, power, or a name people recognized. Trust the ones who love you without needing anything in return. Don't let loneliness, status, or fear make you hold on to someone who only stood near you for what they could gain. Because the people who truly love you, the ones who love with no conditions, no performance, no agenda, they will never force you to choose between loving them and loving the people who raised you. Thank you for staying to the end. And thank you for allowing me to share this part of my life with you. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.